today's video. This is a B2 level grammar lesson. Today we're going to be reviewing the zero first and second conditionals, also looking at mixed conditionals and using those to talk about money. So how do you pay? These are some different ways that people pay. I pay via an app on my phone. I almost always use cash. I use a debit card, or I usually pay by credit card. So credit cards are one of the most successful inventions of the 20th century. When you purchase items on credit, you incur a debt. You have to pay off your credit card debt, preferably each month. A credit card debt is similar to a loan. The bank charges you interest on a loan. The interest rate is an amount that the bank adds to your loan on a regular basis. Do you have or do you know someone who has a credit card? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of purchasing items on credit? And you can answer those questions in the comments to start some conversation. So cards equal convenience. Do you agree? So you can read the text and then answer the questions. You can either pause the video and read on your own, or you can follow along as I read. It seems hard to remember a time before credit cards existed. Today, in the US, almost everyone over the age of 18 has a credit card. So what exactly are the benefits of credit cards, and are the benefits worth the risks? The most obvious benefit is convenience. People do not want to always carry cash around, especially not large amounts. A credit card is easier to carry, and if it's lost or stolen, it can be quickly canceled and replaced with a new one. Plus, credit cards make it simple to make a purchase online, the most convenient way to shop. All online merchants accept credit cards. So he says, many people don't like to change their habits, but it's amazing how quickly people will change their behavior for convenience. Can you think of behavior you have changed for convenience? So look at the introduction. What is the subject of this article? Well, credit cards, the subject. What adjective means clear and visible to everyone? It's obvious. And which noun is a synonym of seller or vendor? It would be merchants. Now we'll read the next part of the text, and you can answer the questions. Again, you can write your answers in the comments if you'd like to generate some conversation. And many cards offer rewards for making purchases, such as savings on travel, discounts on special events, gifts, and more. Additionally, cards give people the ability to buy now and pay later, and to easily track purchases. So do you belong to a store or brand's rewards program? For example, does brand X give you 20% off all online purchases? How do you feel about buy now, pay later systems? And do you keep track of your expenses? And if so, how? Right, there are disadvantages too, so complete the text and answer the questions. You can pause the video, try this on your own, and then restart when you're ready to check your answers. For some people, these benefits might not be enough to outweigh the costs. For example, when people make purchases with a credit card, they often spend more than they would have with cash. And then, when they are unable to pay their bill on time, they are hit with a high interest rate. In fact, the average U.S. household credit card debt in 2013 was over $15,000. A debt like that can take years to pay off. So which verb means to be greater or more significant than? That would be outweigh. And can you think of any other disadvantages of using credit cards? And if so, you can put those in the comments. Which groups of people might be vulnerable to interest rates? And in your country, is it common for people to have credit cards? And again, you can answer those questions in the comments so that we can start to generate some conversation. Now discuss the opinions of Ravi, James, and Apina. Ravi says, if I had a credit card, I would pay off the debt each month. It's not a good idea to owe money to banks. James says, I have a goal this year. If I save money each month, I will go on a vacation in the summer. And Apina says, if my sister saved her money, she would have enough money to buy a car. Instead, she buys useless things and has no money at the end of the month. Now remember that we can use first and second conditionals to talk about future possibilities. So find the conditional in the last section of the article, and then is it a first or a second conditional? You can pause the video, read it on your own, or you can follow along as I read. Another downside is the potential for fraud. Although people are not liable for unauthorized transactions made on their accounts, this is still inconvenient. People have to be careful to protect their personal information and check credit card statements for errors each month. If you're not careful, people will buy things using your credit card details. At the end of the day, credit cards have more positives than negatives, but only when used responsibly. So do you agree with the author's final statement? And you can answer that in the comments. And our conditional was, if you are not careful, people will buy things using your credit card details. So likely and unlikely possibilities. A speaker uses a first or second conditional depending on whether the speaker thinks this is a likely or unlikely situation. We use the first conditional when we imagine a situation and result in the future that is likely or possible. We use if plus the present tense and either will or might plus a verb. If I save money, I will be able to take a vacation at the end of the year. If you don't pay off your credit card, you will increase your debt. We use the second conditional when we imagine a situation and result in the future that is unlikely or impossible. And it's if plus the past simple tense and would or could plus the verb. If I saved money, I could take a vacation at the end of the year. If you didn't pay off your credit card, you would increase your debt. So if we go back to here, if you're not careful, people will buy things with your credit card details. That would be first conditional, because that's a very likely and possible situation. Alright, so we're going to practice conditionals. Complete the sentences with either a first or a second conditional. You can pause the video, try this on your own, and then restart when you're ready to check your answers. So if you saved money, you could buy a new computer. They could afford to buy a house if they didn't waste so much money. If she pays off her debt this month, she'll stop using her card for a while. If we purchased that car, we wouldn't have to use public transportation anymore. And people might use your cards for unauthorized purchases if you aren't careful with your personal details. Now we use the zero conditional to describe an event and result that is always true or that happens often. The same result happens each time the event occurs. If I don't get 7 hours of sleep, I'm grumpy all day. When we throw plastic into the ocean, it stays there for hundreds of years. So when and if both mean every time. We use present tense in both the if clause and the result clause. When I get home from work, I eat a snack and listen to music. He doesn't answer his phone when I call. So if we compare the 0 and the first conditionals, when you arrive, we'll go to that new Italian restaurant. When John comes to New York, we always eat at Buvette. So with it, here the first conditional is when the first event happens, then the second event will occur in the future. Here we're talking about the 0 conditional as something that happens every time. Alright, now read each conditional and indicate whether it's a 0 or a first conditional. Does it describe a possible future event or an event and result that happens regularly? And you can pause the video and try that on your own, and then restart when you're ready to see the answers. So send me a text message when you arrive. That's a 0 conditional. Ice melts when it is exposed to heat. That is 0 conditional. If you aren't quiet, the teacher will kick you out of the classroom. That's first conditional. If you're not tired, come and watch a movie with me. First conditional. When you get to the apartment entrance, look for the name Alder and press on the button. That's 0. We'll never get the train on time unless the taxi driver goes faster. That is first conditional. Susie always feels frightened when it starts to get dark. That is a 0 conditional. He won't lose weight unless he changes his eating habits. That's first conditional. And if we travel to South America, we will certainly visit Peru. That is first conditional. We use the expression if I were you to give advice. When we give advice using if I were you, we are using a second conditional. We don't use if I weren't you. So if I were you, I'd try to save more money, or if I were you, I'd buy that computer on sale. I'm very stressed at the moment. If I were you, I'd take up a new activity. I'm overworked. I don't know what to do. If I were you, I'd think about my friends and family, not my job. Now your friends have some small financial problems. Now give them advice using if I were you. So I have so much debt, I don't know what to do. And so you can put your suggestions in the comments starting if I were you, I would, and then give the advice. I've spent all my money for this month and it's only the 16th today. My mom always wastes money on presents. She spends money on people she barely knows. And I want to go to college in another town, but I need money for an apartment. So share your advice to these people in the comments. Alright, so we're going to listen to a talkback radio show, and then you'll answer the questions.
Welcome to Money Talks. I'm your host, Frank Sanders. And today we're going to take some financial questions from callers. Let's get started. Right now, we have Kevin on the line. Kevin, welcome.
Okay, the name of the show is Money Talks. Frank talks to callers about money issues. And who is he going to speak to first? A caller named Kevin. Alright, so we're going to listen to a longer section, and then you'll answer these questions true or false, and then if they're false, you'll correct them.
Welcome to Money Talks. I'm your host, Frank Sanders. And today we're going to take some financial questions from callers. Let's get started. Right now, we have Kevin on the line. Kevin, welcome.
Thanks, Frank.
Okay, what's your question?
Well, I've been struggling with money my whole life. I'm still paying off my college debt. I'm 28 years old, and I'd like to start to put aside some money to buy a house. How can I make a budget and force myself to save money?
First, pay off that debt. The interest rate on your loan is one of the biggest obstacles to saving money. If you made this a priority, you would save a lot of money in the long term. Personally, I like to follow what I call the 50-30-20 rule. Spend 50% of your after-tax income on essential things, like your rent, utilities, gas, and food, then spend 30% on personal needs. And finally, save 20% of your income. If you do this, you'll have a good start. After you have some savings, you can make some investments, but we'll save that talk for another day.
Thanks, Frank.
Good luck.
Alright, so Kevin has been struggling with money for the last 2 years. That's false. He said he'd been struggling with money his whole life. Kevin has just paid off his college debt. That's false. He's still paying it off. Kevin is 38 years old. That's false. He said he was 28. Kevin wants to put money aside to purchase a house. That is true. Frank recommends that Kevin pays off his debt. That's true. And Frank recommends following what he calls the 40-40-20 rule. That's false. It's the 50-30-20 rule. Alright, we'll listen again and fill in the blanks as we go.
Welcome to Money Talks. I'm your host, Frank Sanders. And today we're going to take some financial questions from callers. Let's get started. Right now, we have Kevin on the line. Kevin, welcome.
Thanks, Frank.
Okay, what's your question?
Well, I've been struggling with money my whole life. I'm still paying off my college debt. I'm 28 years old, and I'd like to start to put aside some money to buy a house. How can I make a budget and force myself to save money?
First, pay off that debt. The interest rate on your loan is one of the biggest obstacles to saving money. If you made this a priority, you would save a lot of money in the long term. Personally, I like to follow what I call the 50-30-20 rule. Spend 50% of your after-tax income on essential things, like your rent, utilities, gas, and food, then spend 30% on personal needs. And finally, save 20% of your income. If you do this, you'll have a good start. After you have some savings, you can make some investments, but we'll save that talk for another day.
Thanks, Frank.
Good luck.
So which conditional sentences does Frank use to give advice? He said, if you made this a priority, you would save a lot of money in the long run. And that would be a first conditional, a zero conditional, because it is a very likely situation. All right, the next caller, we're going to listen.
Good luck. Okay, next we have Natalia. Hi, Natalia. What's your question?
Hi, Frank. I need some simple tips to save more of my income. What's your best advice?
Well, Natalia, this is my favorite tip. It's called the 30-day rule. Whenever you feel the urge to splurge, whether it's for new clothes or a laptop, force yourself to stop. Instead, take the money and deposit it into a savings account. After 30 days, if you still want the item and can afford it, buy it. Often, in those 30 days you'll forget about the item if you don't really need it.
Thanks. You give sensible advice.
Alright, so Natalia wants simple tips to save more of her income. Frank tells her about the 30-day rule. And what does the urge to splurge mean? It's a desire to spend money. And there are two conditional sentences in the recording. What are they? So if you want the item and can still afford it, buy it. And then in those 30 days, you'll forget about the item if you don't really need it. Now, in everyday English, we use many different forms of conditionals. We can use an imperative in the main clause. If you still want the item and can afford it, buy it. Please don't come after 8 p.m. if you want to speak with Sally. if you want to hear and see the birds, don't speak and don't make noise. We can use other present and past tenses in the if clause. If you have finished eating, you can leave the table and go outside to play. If he's still waiting for a taxi at the station, he should call me and I'll collect him. So Fred Sanders is sick, and today you are the host of Money Talks. So give some advice to these callers. Gary, 34, says, I earn a substantial salary, but my money flows through my fingers just like water. I always have too much money, so I eat out every night, I buy new clothes every week, and by the end of the month there's nothing in my savings account. How can I stop wasting money? And Ranja, 24, says, so much of my money disappears before I see it. I seem to have a lot of subscriptions to music programs, streaming programs, news content. I spend more than $250 per month on subscriptions. I'm not sure they are value for money. So, in the comments, you can pretend to be Frank Saunders and give these two people some advice, remembering to use different forms of conditionals. And that brings us to the end of today's video. Please like, subscribe, share, participate in the comments, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.